Hi guys and welcome back. So today we're going to continue a game between Livonian and really young Magnus Carlsen. He was 16 years old at this time. And last time we looked at how Magnus found a really cool and active way to get into a drone rook endgame, which we can see here. Now as you can see, white has 2 pawns and black has 1 pawn. And this is a drone rook endgame. But it's not that easy because even top players, even grandmasters mess it up sometimes. And if you're the defending side, if you have 1 pawn here versus 2 pawns, then you basically want to come into a theoretical draw and use one of the 4 main techniques. We're gonna talk about this in a second, but first let's just see how they got there. Okay, so Livonian played f4, just pushing a pawn, wanting to create a passed pawn and just promote to a queen, of course. And a very important thing here is for black, if you want to defend this position, if you want to draw, then you will really want to keep your pawn on the 7th rank. And that's because if you move it to the 6th rank, then you can see you just created some space here for the white rook, and it could get pretty dangerous. For example, something like this could work, and I mean, he just takes your pawn. For example, something like this, and you really don't want this. You want to keep this pawn on the 7th rank, and because it's a pretty good protector of your king also, and that's why Magnus kept it here. And he played rook to b5 check. Okay, Livonian just blocked the check, and Magnus played king to f8. Now we can see rook to d3 and rook to b4. Now, what is the point of this move? You always want to target the last pawn, the last advanced pawn, because you can see that white is hardly going to activate. He can't play something like this, for example, sometimes because you can just take the pawn and it's better than attacking this pawn, right? Because, I mean, if he moves his king, let's say here, he still defends this pawn and this pawn also defends it. And it's just more logical to defend this pawn, which is last advanced. Because you're trying to prevent white from getting too active, too closer to you, and this is just a good technique to know as a defending side. So okay, white played king to g5, creating space for his pawn to move, and black played king to g7. Okay, we see rook to d7. Now we can see a pretty typical idea for white here, to just play e6 on the next move, and this pawn would be pinned to the king, and white would just win, right? Because if black does nothing, then I mean black can't take it, and he's going to lose this one, and this is just over for black here. So black had to do something, and he played rook to b5, just preventing this pawn from advancing, right? So white played king to g4 back, and we can see king to f8. White really can't do that much here, and the black is playing just fine here. White advanced to f5. We can see king to g7 back, and white tried to maneuver his king to the other side of the board, try something here. We can see check. White blocks the check, and now, of course, you're not going to take this rook because this is just losing now. I mean, I don't know what you're going to play here. If you play something like this, he can just advance and he's going to win. So you really don't want to exchange. That's why you move the rook. He moved it to b1. We can see rook to d7 again and check. And now white plays king to d5. Getting closer, but it's not really dangerous for black. He just checked the king and now move to this f1 square, attacking this pawn here. Last advanced pawn. This is always very good. This is always a very good thing to do. And now the only way to defend this pawn was to basically protect it with a rook. And now black played king to f8, and he said like, what are you going to do? I mean, we can just repeat and draw because white really can't get closer to black's position. And here black just played rook to f2, We can see king to d6, rook to f1. It's really hard for white to do any damage here to black, so it's really not that easy. But it's not easy to defend for black as well, like I said. So white played king to d5. We can see king to e7, rook to a4, preparing some checks probably here. And now black took the opportunity and played f6, trying to exchange one pair of pawns, because then he's going to transpose into a theoretical drawn endgame, which of course he wants. And now, of course, if white takes the pawn, black recaptures, and this is just a draw. White can't do anything. He has to go there, because if he, I don't know, well, I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, on the next move, black can just come closer and win the pawn. So this is just a draw. So white checked the king. Black moved to f8. And now, of course, white didn't take the pawn, because this is a draw. Black can take on f4, because this is the first technique that we can see here of these four most known drawn techniques, and it's called a Philidor position, right? And you probably heard about it. And it's basically when white advances his pawn to this sixth rank, and then you just start checking the white's king, and he has no shelter to block the checks. I can show you here. He has to protect a pawn. I don't know where he's going to go. For example, if he goes there, you just check the king, and if he attacks you, you can go there, just attacking a pawn, or there. Both should be fine, and you can see that white can't make progress, because if you just check the king has no shelter. It has nowhere to go, as you can see here. And if he starts to just uh, march up to take your rook, then you just attack a pawn, and he has to defend it. And now you just check him again. And this is just a draw, theoretical drawn endgame, fielder position. So this wasn't what white wanted, of course, and that's why here he played king to d6, getting closer, and black just exchanged the pawns. And okay, we see some checks here. And now we can see we came into a theoretical drawn endgame again, and here fielder position isn't possible, because if you check the king, then he's just going to go there, and he has shelter, because white's pawn isn't on the 6th rank but is on 5th rank. And that's why Magnus had to use another technique, and let me just mention the other two. The second one is a passive defense, when you have your rook on the 8th rank and also your king. But this only works with rook pawns and knight pawns, not with the central pawns and bishop pawns. But I'm not going to go too much detail with this passive defense, because it's not today's topic. The third one is short side, long side. You also probably know about this one, but it's basically when you go to the short side with your king, the side where there's less space, and you go to the long side with your rook, because you want to check the king from the side. And of course, if you do this on the long side, then the white king is harder going to come to your rook than if you do it on the short side. So this is another technique which we're going to cover in another video if you will want to. And now here we can see the fourth technique that Magnus used. He first of all checked the king, and just to know, rook to e1 is also okay, maybe even simpler. But okay, he played check, and white went to this e6 square. And black played rook to e1. Now, what is the point of this defense? As you can see, uh, white can't really now go with his king to this descent square, because black just captures the pawn. If white goes to d6, we can see check again, and this is the same position that we had before. And the only thing that white can try, I think, is playing rook to a8. And now we just have one move, king to g7. And now you can see the point. He can't advance the pawn, because this king is in a way for it, right? and that's why he has to play something like king to d6, and now we play king to f7, protecting this e6 square twice, so he can't advance because we just take the pawn. And I mean, what is he going to do? If he checks us, we just go there, and we're in the same position. I mean, if he plays this, we go there. This is the same position. And if he advances, again, this is the Philidor position. You can see the pawn on the 6th rank. There's a lot of checks coming. So this is just a draw, but let's see how Magnus messed it up. Livon tried to beat him differently. He played rook to f7, check. And now black moved to e8. We can see rook to h8, threatening checkmate here. And now we can see this short side and long side technique. Magnus went to the short side. You can see that this is the short side over this side, right? You can see there are 3 squares and there are 4 squares. So he went on the short side. Okay, Livon checked him. We can see king to g7, white moves. And now, as I said, rook to a1. You can see checks from the side, and I mean, when white comes closer to your rook, you can then just go there and take the pawn. So that's the whole point of this, and he's hardly going to escape the checks. So white played king to e7, and Magnus attacked the pawn. Um, White advanced it, and this is totally fine. This is still a draw for black, but let's see how Magnus messed it up. He played rook to a7 check. White played rook to d7. You of course don't want to trade because this is just lost, right? So Magnus played rook to a8, which is still drawn. And now white played rook to d6, and now black made a mistake. Please pause the video and try to figure it out which is the drawn move here. And yeah, let's see if you get it right. Okay, so the correct move is king to g6, because white just can't do anything. If he moves his king to d7, for example, you just move your king to f6, and he can't do anything. If he pushes the pawn, you just play king to f7, and there's no way for him to do anything, and you're just going to play rook to a7 on the next move and just take this pawn. Everything was drawn, everything was okay, until black played here rook to a7 check. And now the point is, if white plays rook to d7, then okay, this is just a draw. Again, we just repeat. But white played king to e8 here, and this is just over. Because what are you going to do? He's going to advance his pawn. For example, if you play rook to f6, he just advances with a check. He plays something. You just move your rook, for example, here. And now you're just going to play king to f8 and promote to a queen. So this was a crucial mistake here by Magnus. If he didn't make this mistake, the game would be drawn. But unfortunately, he did it, and this could happen to anybody. These rook endgames are really not that easy to defend. And it's clear that he knew this drawn techniques, but he just messed it up at the end a bit, and I mean, that's alright. So what I want you to remember from this game here is that when you have one pawn versus 2 pawns in a rook endgame, always try to attack the pawn that is less advanced, because you're keeping white less active with this, and also try to keep your pawn on the 7th rank as long as possible, because it's a pretty good defender of your king also from the checks of the opponent rook. And always just try to exchange one pair of pawns and then come into a theoretical drawn endgames and use one of these 4 techniques that we talked about in this video. And if you want to see videos about all these 4 techniques in detail, then please comment down below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I'll see you in the next video.